Everybody, let's go ahead and kick off for today. How we doing? What we got in here today? We got Chris in here today. We got Maria. We got Tom, Michael, John. Awesome, guys. We got Brendan. How we doing, everyone? Let's go ahead and kicking it off here today. Today, we have our topic. We're going to talk about the bookkeeping and accounting side of what do we do for our real estate investing and what is going to be important for us about that coming into it. So let's go ahead and kick off into, let's just do like some quick sharing here about like what are we currently doing for our bookkeeping and accounting. Wondering about that, who might have some ideas for us, wants to share about like what they're currently doing for their bookkeeping and accounting, so we can get some context for what are typical best practices. So you can see here where I started to like chart out for Chris and Brendan. Here's all of the different pieces that I picked up from them, right? The Brendan does QuickBooks, his accounting keeps his mind in the business. And we also knew that the core driver for Brendan in doing what it was he wanted like the peace of mind of knowing it's done right? So that tells us like, okay, somebody's going to operate this way. What is operating this way effective towards? Well, it's effective towards like a peace of mind initiative that we have with it, right? And then he can know that his expenses are clear. And that it gives them like a true ROI is what he identified here of what's really going on with his properties and really understanding what happens with that. So Chris identified for us, this as like, hey, listen, when we start to get anything that's at scale, you're going to want to do the stuff that's online, and you're going to want to make sure that you have strict rules, that things are in order for how they're going to go. And that it's really important. Why is it so important? Because he's had great partnerships. It would have been really, really probably lucrative for him financially if they would have worked out, but they went south because this piece wasn't addressed appropriately. And once that partnership starts to go south, you start to lose trust. The partnership's crap. You have to find a new person, right? And now like that's a whole reset of potentially tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars because we did a system that didn't work, right? We assumed something was going to work here that didn't, right?
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah. We also heard, what's up, Chris?
You're right. Hundreds of thousands. I've lost
thousands of dollars.
Bookkeeping.
That's it for bookkeeping, right? Yeah. A bookkeeping cost is what kept us from making hundreds of thousands of dollars.
No, I lost hundreds of thousands.
Even worse, right?
Yeah.
Not into it, right?
Yep.
And that Chris also identified for us here is that this is a garbage in, garbage out type of activity. That if what you're putting inside of your books is garbage, then the insights that you get are also garbage. One of the reasons that Brendan is so keen on doing all of this extra work is because it gives him peace of mind. But it's also he's making sure, because he's managing it to the degree he said, no, I don't got garbage, I got diamonds. I'm polishing these numbers. I'm making sure I know every cent is coming out, because from there, that's what gives him the insights about how the ROI is doing on his properties. It's also, from what I heard from Chris, this is also the ROI I'm going to get from using a CFO or a CPA. Because my CPA, what does everybody want when they go to the CPA, right? They say, I hear this all the time, I want tax strategy. I want proactive tax strategies. I want my CPA coming into me and telling me what do I need to be doing different to make more money and how I can take advantage of the taxes. Cool. Well, is this happening? Because if not, how are we ever going to get to that? Right? Because if this is not done in the appropriate way, then how can we ever get to the appropriate tax strategy? In fact, if you listen to Brendan into it, he'd probably tell you, well, much less tax strategy. Do you even know how much money you're making to know how much you should be trying to save on taxes? Probably not, right? So what I'm hearing from you guys is like, no, our bookkeeping, and what I'm learning is like, hey, our bookkeeping, we actually feel that this is essential for us to be able to have peace of mind of knowing that our business is operating correctly, or our business partnerships are operating correctly, how those businesses are truly performing for us in terms of our top line revenue, how much money are we actually making, and that we can forget about doing anything that's more advanced like proactive tax strategies until we get this cleared out, because it's garbage in, garbage out. That nobody's going to be prepared to be able to really help you at an intensive level. Sure, we're going to be able to look at some general practices on tax strategy. Hey, maybe solo 401k, right? Maybe some just generalized things, maybe shelter stuff through your auto or through your kids, your home office deduction, that kind of thing. But the really detailed, the really powerful, the really exact tax strategies, that has to come from that. And then I also learned from Chris so far today here too, is that he has this in 3 different stages. He'll do it if it's a low transaction and it's personal business, he's going to do self. And that reminds me a lot of like what Brendan's doing here. And that if he has a partner, he'll have the partner do it if it's high transactions, and the partner has to have it as part of one of their core responsibilities. That if it's an operational based partner, he says, hey, you're in charge of the bookkeeping, you're agreeing to be on top of this and to whatever in order means for us that we're going to agree on. I've had to be a practice for that. And do you agree to that? If so, then the partner will take that on. And then if it looks like the partner's like, no, I can't take that on, I says, okay, cool. That's when we're going to pay somebody else because we're too busy to actually get to the level of quality we need here. But what I hear from Chris is we would never sacrifice the level of quality because the cost of not having the quality is too high.
100%. And even if they're willing to do it, if their time is better spent elsewhere, then we're going to get a bookkeeper because a bookkeeper is a lot less expensive than somebody who's good at finding good new deals. So
that would be like if you partnered with Brendan, right? And you're like, you got to bring like Brendan's like, no, I can lock in 10 more deals, but I'm trying to figure out where this $132 in escrow is, right? And you say, no, Brendan, we're hiring a bookkeeper for $100 a month, man. Go get those deals. Right? That would be the analogy there, right? Fair to say, right?
100%.
Right? And to it. But you'd probably say, amazing, Brandon, you really understand your business. We've teed up exactly what we need to be able to go pass it off to a bookkeeper and make sure the system is going to run the right way, right? So it's not like setting this up yourself goes to waste, right? It's actually setting up a system you understand. So there's probably a lot of good value for everybody that's listening to this is like, hey, I'm self-managing my books. That's amazing. Is it at the level that you really want it to be? Is it really giving you the insights about how your true ROI is? Is it really setting up your CPA to be able to tell you whether it's Pete in here inside of Royal Legal Solutions or it's somewhere else? Are they really set up to be able to give you the kinds of insights you're asking for when you're saying, hey, I'm frustrated because I'm not getting proactive tax strategy? Well, how well are you setting them up to be able to do that, right? Maybe there's some things here to understand about when do we outsource, when we not into it. And then if we are doing it personally currently, is that inside of our budget to say, hey, if I wasn't doing this bookkeeping, and when is my bookkeeping at the quality standard? I'm going to say probably not to be able to get there, just kind of shooting off the cuff. Most people don't. This is the number one area people slack on as their bookkeeping, right? But if that's not being done, then cool. Then set the standards, just like Chris was talking about, of like what in order means to you, or talk to Chris or talk to us about what those standards look like, get that system set up the right way, and then cool, then pass it off to a bookkeeper and focus on the more dollar productive activities. If you can't be more dollar productive than your bookkeeping, then we need to have another talk about like how to make money in the world, because I can guarantee everybody here is on this call. The fact that you're in this call tells me that you're somebody who's serious about what your financial future is going to look like. And also you have the brains to be able to put together deals and make money, and that it shouldn't be put into administrative stuff unless the administrative pieces are necessary for you to understand, like they are for Brendan, about like, how is this business actually working, right? And having that work, or Chris with his oversight of other people. Cool. So I just want to break that down for you guys, because everybody's like, well, what do I do for my bookkeeping, right? What do I do for my bookkeeping and accounting? What else if you was like, hey, it depends. And that was the purpose of this conversation we had right here, is to say, hey, what does it depend on? Right. And so this is the kind of thinking, if we were in a one-on-one consult with me and Pete, that this would be the type of conversation we would have about what is the appropriate level for bookkeeping, just like we talk about the appropriate level for tax and such. So when we think about our path to financial freedom, right, and building the legacy that we want, there's two of the most important pieces that we always talk about on the very top of that freedom temple. You guys know, like on the Royal Legal Solutions website, we have that graphic that's like the temple, and at the very top of the temple is wealth creation, right? Because until you're creating money out there, none of the rest of the stuff matters, right? Until you have to start making money first. And then what's number two? It's tax strategy. So when we talk about what's the goal here, what I've heard is like there's two major goals. It's a better understanding of your most dollar productive activities. This is what Brendan was getting to, right? He's really, and Chris was losing on it, saying, when I really understand my bookkeeping and accounting, I can really understand what is the most dollar productive activity I can make out of here, right? How can I really influence it? And the second thing to do is, well, hey, can it also set up my CPA to help me save money on my taxes? So this is the making money part of the equation, and this is the saving money, keeping the money part of the equation. Now we know we have a bunch of other stuff like asset protection and insurance and all that kind of other good stuff. That's keeping money, but in a different context. Right now, like this is just the money, keeping the money part, right? I thought we have it, not all the other things that could happen to us along the way that we have to cover off on the risks about. So I was thinking, what do you guys think about having like a quick discussion about, for everybody here and for the benefit of everybody here, is how would we approach bookkeeping, or how would we advise like that typical investor that has somewhere between like 0 to 10 properties, to it, that are thinking about like their bookkeeping, and they heard Chris just say, hey, you really want to make sure you're doing this right. And we were learning from Brendan, hey, Brendan is really focused on making sure this is done right. But they're still kind of at that place of saying, I don't really know what to do. And I'm in a place that says, I kind of want to see if I can figure this out on my own before I just punt it to a professional, because maybe I'm cash strapped at the moment, right? Or that I really want to figure it out on my own first so I can really understand it. But I don't really know what are the first steps to take and going about doing it. So what would we advise as a community about what would be the appropriate approach for somebody to take here while they're on this mission? They're on the Chris mission, which is, how do I first set up everything for myself and this where Chris and Brendan are at for some of their activities? And then how do I migrate to partners to the outsourced professionals that come with it? And if we just focused here like on the self part for right now, what would be important for us on that? Chris, go ahead and take us away. Everybody else, raise your hand if you have some ideas here as you're listening to Chris. So far what I picked up from you, Chris, is saying, hey, listen, when you're approaching this concept of like, what do I need to do for my accounting and bookkeeping? First thing I probably want to do is find somebody that I can listen to. And maybe that person has made money the same way I'm looking to make money, right? So if I got 6 properties and I know Julie has 7 properties and I'm working all out of state with a bunch of out of state stuff, and so is Julie, maybe Julie's the right person I talk to and ask her, hey, Julie, what are you doing? What's working for you there? Into it. And then like there's also a second consideration, which is, well, determining the complexity of the kind of help you need can depend upon your scope and your needs. Like multi-state has a bigger scope, harder to keep track of multiple books from different properties, from different states, different property managers, et cetera. And also like leveraging into your team, like your property management team, and saying like, hey, are they at least doing the minimum things they need to be doing to facilitate there? Cool. So then we even have like a new topic in here, right? Which is like competency. And there was like a couple of different things you looked for, which was like, when we turn into the topic here of like, how do we determine how competent somebody is? What are the key factors that you're looking for? I heard you say before, it's like, I'm looking for some type of accreditation, maybe that they have, right? Like maybe they have a degree in like accounting or something like that. Maybe like, maybe they have like a same business experience. So we want years will tell you ability, but ambition will tell you a little bit about more of like, hey, how many clients have you had? How difficult were, what kind of difficult situations have you had to navigate through? Tell me more about like, you can also look in here too. I think you also have something in here too, is like, what's your thread of success of people helping people that are like me, right? Can I look back at like the history of other people that you've seen and said, what's made you be successful in helping all of these other people for me to know that you're actually the right person for me? I was picking up from you, Jeff, in here is that we had as our third thing we might want to look for when saying like, hey, what are we going to look for help inside of our bookkeeping? We talked about like, hey, you want to find somebody who's really listening to you, right? And like somebody that can help you think through like your scope and your needs with some specificity here. And then also it's like, hey, how good are they at providing in like upfront value without actually paying them $1? Right. And this might tell us, it says like, are they actually like are they an education oriented company? Are these giving people? Like education really says like, these are people that really want to give. They really want to see like some success actually happen, because what we've seen, what happens if it's not education, well, then I'm spending a bunch of money and I don't see the value, right? I just did a thing, but I don't see the value in the thing, right? And even if there were value in the thing, you're not educated enough to be able to see where the value is in the thing. I'm not trying to say that that's the case, right? But I'm saying like, the piece that we're critically missing here is saying like, well, we know that if people lead with education for us, then that gives us a much higher belief that whatever the work is I'm going to do with them is actually going to be valuable that comes out of it, instead of just like, here's a template. Now go figure out what you want to do next into it. Is that right? Cool. So that might help us here in profiling out, like, where do we start to listen of like, who are we going to connect with that is going to be able to help us through this bookkeeping journey. And was there anything else that came top of mind for you on, we had this idea of like competency, and maybe that education is like another piece. Education led tells us that people are more competent. If they're leading with education, that tells us that they're a more competent type of service provider. It comes into it because they can actually give away all the information for free and still say, yeah, and you're still going to want to hire me, even after I tell you all my tricks, because you're going to want to see it executed. So I pulled a couple of things from the last two shares to pull in for us here, guys. So one that we talked about is like, it was around, Brandon was talking about the communication and like, can they speak at my level? Are they real? And are they really understanding my current capabilities that I have? And can they speak at my level? And then we said for a protocol that we would say, well, how are we going to find out whether this person that we're interviewing to help us here, these are some of the questions that we might want to ask them and that we would expect of them to ask of us. It's like, what are you currently doing with your real estate? And if their answer is, well, I'm not doing anything with my real estate, it says, well, now they've failed one of our competency requirements. That doesn't mean we necessarily don't work with them, but they're not a real estate investor, right? Say, well, cool. That tells us enough there. So what kinds of quality questions can they ask me about what I'm doing? Can they really understand my current capabilities and what's going on in my world with the questions that they're currently doing here, or do they jump to something else? So it might tell us that, hey, and we understand that high quality relationships start at this level of understanding what are you currently doing and what are the current capabilities that we have, these two areas. So anybody that we would go and talk to, we're evaluating them not just on their knowledge and their competency, but also what is the method by which you, professional who's talking to me, is evaluating me. Can I tell about how good you are at your job by how you're evaluating me as an intake? Because that'll tell me how well you're actually thinking through the problems and knowing like what's going to be the appropriate level of advice. And then from there, what we'd be looking for is them to help guide us through setting a baseline of where are we at currently, right? This is understanding more of our capabilities. And can they tell us what's our plan for upskilling? How are you going to help me get any better in these areas? How are you going to help facilitate my better knowledge about what's going to happen into it? And that becomes part of their competency. When we looked at all of these competency factors, right, we have a bunch here. Are they a real estate investor? Are they in the same business experience with like maybe a similar number of properties and quantities? Do they have excitement about like what it is that the work they're doing? Does it look like they have the appropriate workload, or are they over? They have too many clients to really be able to service at the level that I need. And are they available? Now, these two pieces here too, I would also say as a customer or a client of anybody of that professional, is to set the baselines of what your expectations are here in the very beginning of your relationship. To ask someone they're going through here, these are my expectations. Are you going to be able to meet those? And not to do business unless they can say, yep, we are very crystal clear on what those expectations look like. And that's inside of something I can meet for you. Because otherwise you don't know whether to fire them or not after the first go. And you need to know when it's the right time to fire people. And the best way to know to fire people is to have really clear expectations and let them break them, right? And let them fail. So you say, great, not you, I need to find the next person. Because if I have really clear expectations and you can't meet it, then I need somebody else in my life. Because there's enough people out there that can make crystal clear expectations and actually follow through with them that I don't have to negotiate around what that's going to be. We also talked about highly competent professionals are going to be education led, and that they're going to have some type of like years of experience, of ability, ambition, of where we want them to have some type of time in, but also like what are the number of clients and what are the kinds of difficult problems they solve. Maybe I'm a really easy client, right? But I know I'm growing. So maybe I want to know what are the more difficult matters that they've come across. Right. And that would tell us like, great, well, wherever I'm growing and however I'm growing, is this person going to be able to grow with me? Are they going to be able to take on the additional pieces that I have? Because the more I can leverage into a single relationship, the more valuable that relationship comes for me, because the relationships are expensive. They don't always work out. They only work out about 34% of the time if you trust HR statistics on what professional relationships look like inside of the work environment. And it takes up a bunch of our time. And our time is the one resource they're not making any more of. So more important than cost, you might consider it's how much time do I need to develop new relationships or to be able to leverage into those teams, especially if they can meet all of these other competency requirements that we've had. And then lastly, I'm looking for some type of threat of success. What is it that makes you powerful? And I can see consistently time and time again that you're doing with people that you can explain to me that makes you successful in supporting them, Mr. CPA, right? And they should be able to tell you the story about people they've helped that are like you and how they helped them, why that was powerful, why that was important, right? And shifting, because they should also be able to talk you through this. Should I be self-managing? Should I have somebody else do it? Or should I hire this out as a professional? What are the considerations that are going to come for me here, right? And that's going to be part of this thread of success type of topic, right? The thread of success should diagnose down into the same thing we were talking about before as understanding the capabilities. And that tells you where is this person at and those main buckets for it. This is the question that I always ask everybody. I'll give you guys, this is one way that Scott Smith actually vets people as well too. Well, you guys know I'm a litigator, right? So when I'm talking about tax issues or asset protection issues, contract, et cetera, what I'm always worried about is this thing called litigation risk, right? Meaning, if I get into a lawsuit, what's my likelihood of winning this lawsuit? Whether it's going to be a breach of contract issue or whether it's going to be, hey, I got audited. Audits are just lawsuits, right? It's just an investigation before a lawsuit, right? That happens. So when I talk to my tax professionals into it, when I ask them, I said, hey, are you a white hat operator or a black hat operator or somewhere in between? White hat means I'm totally pure. I'm going to do everything by the book in the most conservative reading of that information I possibly could do. Black hat says, I'll do some stuff for you, but you might go to jail, right? Into it. So black hats, we don't work with black hats, right? Because jail is not an acceptable outcome, right? Even if you can get out of it because like, hey, they can get it pled down to some type of civil penalty or something like that. I think it's just too stressful and there's not enough juice to be worth the squeeze on having somebody lingering with like putting jail time over my head of whatever I'm doing. If I'm just playing out, the only thing I care about is money, right? Into it, still jail is not acceptable outcome for when it happens for me, right? So for some people it is, right? And we see those people out on the streets doing whatever they're doing, right? They're money making in jail time. They're okay with that kind of risk. I think that's a little too rough for me. So what I do is I ask them, well, if you rate it on a scale of 0 to 10, and 0 is, hey, I'm the most conservative I could possibly be. And I read everything into that light. And 10 is the most aggressive I could possibly be. Where do you want to set? And what I find is a lot of people will say 7. And what I tell them is you can't pick 7. You can pick 0 to 6, or you can pick 8 to 10. Oh. 7 is a cop-out number into it. But I want to know where do you see yourself fitting into here, right? And then what this tells me is when they tell me whatever that number is going to be, that tells me, okay, who am I dealing with here? What's their comfortability with risk, right? As it comes into it. And then the other piece to it is the more that I go this way onto this timeline, the more expensive my professional advice becomes. Because what that actually means is I'm threading, I got a big needle I can thread to be okay. And the farther I go this way, the more that I need really specific advice and really high level advice. Because why? Because if I guess wrong, do I go to jail? And so I'm like, cool, this is where I might want tax attorneys, high level CPAs, et cetera, which means great. It makes financial sense for me to get more aggressive with my litigation risk, to spend more money on professionals. But what does that really mean? That means I need to be making some serious cheese to get this aggressive because my professional help on making sure I'm on the right side has to be dialed in.
But can't you say that? I mean, there's also a big difference between something where you lose money and something that you're going to go to jail. I mean, if this litigation risk is on a 0 or a 1 to 10 scale of specifically going to jail, then I'm as white hat as you can get. I'm not going to jail. I don't want to.
What I'm getting at is it's non-binary. That the questions, if it's criminal activity and potential criminal charges, I never will be okay with that. I'm only okay paying civil penalties because then I understand it's a money-making game. Right? And we're all playing this money-making game together about how aggressive are we going to be. So anything that has a potential misdemeanor or felony charge to it is off the table, right? But I will play the game of how much does it cost for me to thread the civil side of things, because then there's the cost benefit, right? The cost is on one side is my attorney and CPA cost, and I need that to be less than the payoff of whatever I think doing that strategy is actually.
Risk reward.
Yeah, it's just a simple risk reward, but I'm using risk reward in terms of what my attorney and CPA costs. So this might be a little bit more advanced than most people in this group would need, but I want to just open up the kimono a little bit and show you guys at like what another level of how business people that we have here can think through some of these issues. So Julie's given us a little bit of like, here's a system hack, right? Which says, well, great. If you just took your active income, your passive income, and your personal and said, hey, these are going to be separate bank accounts with separate credit cards, that's going to help us categorize everything in your QuickBooks or whatever your accounting software happens to be. And then it's also going to help you ensure that you're preserve your asset protection and for everything that you need to do on that front of it, because it's going to be appropriately categorized, which is what we know is important for us for piercing the corporate veil or other corporate protection issues. So Julie, thanks for outlining that strategy. This is a super powerful strategy as a baseline. When you're still in this phase here too, and doing self-management, Julie's a great person to talk to. It sounds like she's got a great little system that keeps things really clear for her about what needs to happen. And maybe one of these future sessions, we'll be able to dive in deeper around this idea of the self-management. Since in this episode, I think we went really deep into some super high level considerations of business and CPAs and whatnot. But I wanted to take the time to do that today so we can at least see the full map of, hey, as I'm growing into my first $1 million net worth, my first $5 million net worth, my first company, my 10th company, what does that system play out to be? And what are the considerations I need to know? Because if not, what happens is you're looking out into the world wondering, am I doing the right stuff? And I hear all of these people doing all of these different things. And how do I know that I'm doing the things that are appropriate for me? Right. So that was the purpose that we're giving today, is like, I hope everybody can see coming out of this episode of like, hey, this is the lane I'm in. This is what's appropriate for me. These are the types of things I'm looking for in the people I want to attract into my world. And I need to get really clear about what it is exactly that I'm looking for when I go to talk to that person. What do I want them to be asking me about? How do I want them to be answering questions that I ask them? And what are those responses going to be that tells me that's the right person? And we can dig into some more of that into how do we vet, going to be vetting professionals, but also how are we going to be doing self-management, since I know a lot of us do self-management here. So thank you, Julie, Chris, Jeff, and Brendan for all of your participation in here today. We're going to go ahead and pick up any of the questions that people have on the Discord channel. If you're not in the Discord channel, hop into there with any questions you have coming out of here today around bookkeeping. If you want looking for like links and other information or other resources that we might be able that us as a community can help each other with, and being able to upskill in this area. And if you find yourself being in a place that you're maybe too shy to talk here in the group, that's a great place to be able to do it and get some additional support that I know that me and the professional team, as well as some of our strong members of the community, interact well through that Discord channel. So thank you guys so much for joining in today. Very much my pleasure to be able to lead us through this discussion today. Can't tell you how ecstatic I am about the level of wisdom that we have here inside of this group, pulling together issues that I think are, you could spend a whole week in a seminar and spend $10,000 to get this kind of education that would come into it of like, how does this stuff work? And I just think that's rad that we get the opportunity to be able to create that for each other. So thank you guys so much for all coming in and being a part of the great stuff that we're creating here in service to each other. So see you guys next week. Take care. Have a blessed week. Hope it's profitable for you.